really did fit in with that crowd in the first place.
Probably not.
Right. I mean, he kept pretty well separate, so he probably wasn't all that well liked by the town.
Right.
That's say he had been living there for 15 years?
15 years at this point. Right. 15 years at this point. So let me share with you an interesting medrash. This medrash, the Ramban brings it down, and it's from one of the medrashim called Medrash Tanchuma. I'm sorry? Different medrash. Wrong book. This is a medrash, it's from in the Bereshis Rabbah, the Medrash Rabbah, and actually describes the intent of the townspeople over here. Okay, so the Medrash says, they say, the townspeople of Sodom say to Lot, here, you came to live amongst us, you're not a native, you came to live here, and now you're going to judge us? Right now, we're gonna deal with you. Because you're questioning our law that we have here in Sodom, in Sodom. And what was the law? Any guests that come to stay over here in Sodom and Gomorrah, we are going to violate them and we're going to take all their money. Right? So what they said to Lot is, you are questioning this long-standing principle, this long-standing law that we've had on the books in Sodom. So what was the law? Sodom and Gomorrah is a very interesting place. It's down in the, basically, if you're in the southeast of Israel, right around where like Masada is in that whole area, and you look over the Jordan River and you see a whole oasis of trees, that's probably where Sodom and Gomorrah was. And it was a beautiful area, and not such a beautiful part of the world. And it was, so to speak, the original gated community. Right? You had these people live there, and they were worried that since they lived in such a beautiful area, that outsiders would always try and come in and move in, and they wanted to find a way to keep the riffraff out. So from the time that they settled their country, so to speak, their town, they decided they would have a law on the books to make it clear that no people would ever try and move in. And that was that if anybody ever tried to come in, they would violate them, both sexually and in terms of their possessions.
Men and women.
Men and women, everyone would be violated who would try and come in. And if you think about it, that's two different sides of the same coin. You know, we have, obviously the worst type of violation is a violation of a person's body, but at a lesser level, there's also a violation of one's possessions. Right? Taking all your possessions is a violation of your possessions.
So was this law put on the books after Lot got there?
And it seems that it was put on before, and that was their issue to Lot.
Yeah.
They were saying, here, we've had this law.
Why didn't they fulfill their law when he got there?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. How was Lot ever able to get in? But it seems like the law was on the books, because the whole question they had to Lot is, you moved here, we let you in. We somehow let you get past this law, and now you're questioning our laws? Who are you to question our laws? Get out of the way.
But what was Lot was already in Sodom when he was kidnapped and brought out?
Yeah, exactly. That's where he was. Yeah.
So, you know, maybe it was because Abraham went and defeated the people that grabbed him and let him return. So they probably at some level had some fear because they knew he had an uncle down the road there that had a lot of resources.
Were these? No, this is not stupid. Were these Hebrews?
No.
They were what? They were idol worship.
They don't idol worship. The only Hebrews around at this point are Abraham and Sarah.
They had, okay, just those two.
Yeah. There's no other Hebrews around at this point.
Okay.
Yeah. Are there any other questions on this point? So yeah, go ahead, David.
Going back a couple of pages, it's still out of order. When the angels first show up to the tent, and he has his wife and servants prepare this great meal. This is before kashrus.
Right.
Because it says the calf and the milk.
Great question, and the Talmud deals with that question.
Right, but it wasn't cooked.
Well, you have another problem that exists, and that is that the Talmud says that our forefathers kept the whole entire Torah before the Torah was ever given. That if the Torah is a guidebook for the world, if you're not an engineer, so to speak, you need the handbook. But if you're really an engineer and really understand how things work, you don't need a handbook. So too our forefathers had such an innate understanding of God and the world, they didn't need the handbook to live. So they were able to follow the whole entire Torah without the Torah. So we were told that Abraham did keep kashrus, and that's why, and we didn't make the point before, but we'll focus on it in a minute. We see that Abraham was eating matzahs. Why was he eating matzahs? This was 1,000 years before the Exodus, or it's 500 years before the Exodus. Why was he eating matzahs? Right? Because he was able to understand that this was the time period where the best way to manifest whatever was going on at this time period was to eat matzahs. Now we also have to ask the question we'll get to in a moment, why was Lot eating matzahs? Right? Because Lot was not on the level of Abraham. But, so that's a great question you're asking. Now the Talmud says that what happened was, and this fits in the verses too, that he served them the cream, or the milk or whatever it was, and then served them the meat. Which is, which you can have milk before meat, but you can't have meat before milk. So that's what the Talmud says, and that's if you look at the order of the verses, he says he served them milk, and then he served them the meat, which parenthetically was tongue. That's what the Talmud says. Which I love tongue, so that's what I was.
So not too many people went to Sodom. That was
yeah, so getting back to our point over here, yeah, there was a law on the books to keep people out of Sodom.
And they stayed out.
And that's what was going on over there. So that's one level of insight to what was going on here. Now we'll come back to that in a moment, how that plays in with Lot, and why Lot was challenging the laws, and we're going to take that a step further. But I just want to throw an interesting medrash just to think about. We're not going to discuss it tonight, we're going to discuss it more next week. But it's an interesting medrash to describe Lot and his daughters and what was going on over there. The medrash says, "B'noeg sheba'olam," this was David's point before, the common way that people act in the world, "Adam moser atzmo al b'nosav al ishto v'horeg o nehera." A person will typically do anything to protect his daughters and to protect his wife. And he will either kill or be killed in order to protect his wife. That's generally how people act. They will do anything possible to protect their wife and their daughters. V'zeh, below, Moshe b'nosav l'hisol behen, he was so willing to give over his daughters. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu la'atzmecha ata mishamron. God said to Lot, it must be that you're saving them for yourself. A bit of a strange medrash over there. Right? We see that Lot was willing to give over his daughters, so God says, it must be you're saving them for yourself.
So I figured the man didn't want his daughters anyway. Is that what we're to infer from this?
Well, I think I would take it from the other side, that what is the accusation that God is putting on Lot, that it must be you're saving them for yourself? He gave him over. He tried to give him over. Why is it that God's, Kaviyachal's thought, so to speak, was oh, you're so willing to give them over, it must be you're saving them for yourself. That's your homework, to think about that. We're going to get that a little bit more next week, because that's a whole different point we're going to make. But I just had the book open, so I figured I'd give it to you for homework. That'll be for next week. But let's finish up over here with the angels for a bit. Now, I want to raise one more interesting timeline that we were focusing on a little bit before, and that is what the angels were doing here. If I were to ask you the question, why did these angels go to Sodom, what would you say?
They were sent by God.
They were sent by God.
Check out the people.
Right, check out the people.
They were messengers and investigators.
Messengers and investigators. I'm going to take that a step forward. They were also the executioner. They were the ones who were carrying out God's will to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Right? Taking all this into account, I think we see that their actions are a little bit strange. If their goal was simply to save Lot, then how should they have acted? They should just run into the city, get Lot, and run out. What did they do instead?
Yeah, but I thought that was part of what Abraham was bargaining with God. If they could find, so many decent people that in fact the city would not be destroyed.
So you say that they were looking for the decent people.
So they were looking, in a way, I think that's why they were going to go to the town square and observe either 10 or 50 or how many people there was supposed to be, so that we don't have to destroy the city.
Okay, so you're saying that their goal was not to save Lot, it was just that Lot was the only one who they found who was righteous enough to be saved. Okay, interesting point.
How about, wasn't Sodom in Israel?
It was probably in what's today Lebanon, which is the